How would the legalization of marijuana affect the South Carolina housing market? Well, the answer might surprise you. Bill Olson here, your favorite YouTubing Charleston realtor. And that's right, today we're talking about how the legalization of marijuana is going to affect the South Carolina housing market. We don't know when this could happen, but I don't think it's too far off in the future, because back in February of 2022, the South Carolina Senate actually voted by nearly 2-1 in favor of legalizing medical marijuana. However, in May, it was shot down by the House. So to me, this means it is on the horizon. It is in the talks. We don't know when, but I think it's going to happen. So we need to know what its effects are going to be, not just on the economy, but in my realm, the real estate market. So we're going to mainly focus on residential real estate. I'm going to touch a little bit on land and commercial as well. But before we get started, I want to know, are you for or against the legalization of marijuana? And if you're for, is it just medical or medical and recreational? So let's start with the land real quick, because this is where everything starts. Cannabis is a plant. Plant comes from the land. You need land to grow the plant, or else you don't have a business. A lot of people's first instincts might be, I'm going to go buy some land, grow some marijuana, and make a ton of money. Well, in theory, that sounds great, but here's what you need to remember about land and the values of land in states that have legalized marijuana. And it all comes down to zoning. And zoning is actually given into the hands of the cities, the towns, the municipalities, the counties. So in each of these areas, only a certain amount of land can be zoned for marijuana crops. Therefore, if you just own some land, you can't just go and start growing on it. You do need to be zoned specifically to grow cannabis. And because of this, this is going to make that demand for these parcels of land so much higher in the beginning. So the words of caution that I have for you is to make sure that you're not paying 5-10 times the value of that land, because it is a hot commodity now. Zoning can always change. What happens if they double, triple, quadruple the number of parcels that can be zoned for cannabis? Now you have greatly overpaid for this product just to be the first in the door. And conversely, if you do overpay in the beginning, I'm not really sure how much money you make as a weed farmer. I'm sure it's a lot. So do your numbers and just make sure that the numbers work for you for now and in the future. When it comes to the commercial side, we've got warehouses and production facilities, and then we've got retail and storefronts or dispensaries. And that is the portion I want to focus in on here real quick, because that is in our communities. And this is going to carry on to residential real estate, which we get into next. In states that have legalized marijuana, whether medical or recreational, it was noted that there had been seen a 25% increase in demand for storefronts. I actually thought this number was going to be a lot higher than just 25%, with a lot of people trying to capitalize on this new market. And kind of like the weird vape shop boom a few years ago. But then I read that in Arizona specifically, in the state, there are actually only 170 cannabis business licenses given out. That means there are a maximum number of 170 storefronts that can operate in the entire state of Arizona. And this year alone, in 2022, those businesses are expected to do $1.5 billion of business. Of the studies I read and watched and listened to a lot, which I'll link everything below in the description for you if you want to read those. When it came to commercial property values, there wasn't much of a change due to the legalization of marijuana. I think that is because of the limited number of storefronts that we would see throughout the state. And according to a massive study done by the National Association of Realtors, about 80% of the commercial agents that were surveyed were not leasing to marijuana businesses. Okay, now let's get into the meat of all of this, why you're here, and this is residential real estate. Before we begin on this, I do want to know, with with that commercial talk, like if a dispensary was moving into your neighborhood or you were looking to purchase a home and a dispensary was nearby, would that deter you from moving into the neighborhood, or would it be a benefit to you? Let us know in the comments and let us know why. When it came to analyzing all this data and how it could affect the South Carolina housing market with the legalization of marijuana, there were two main studies that I looked at. One was that aforementioned study by the National Association of Realtors, which they sent out surveys to about 10,000 agents in areas that have legalized marijuana to see what the changes were. And the other was done by the University of Oklahoma, which was a much more detail-oriented post. So I'm using all of this data together to tell you what we can expect once it is legalized here in South Carolina. When we think about this as a whole, the major thing that legalizing marijuana is doing is creating a new market. Well, a new legal market. And creating a new market does what? It creates jobs. Now, these jobs are going to be all the way from farming to the warehouses to the retail. And with creating these new jobs in this new legal market, that creates more in-migration into the state. More in-migration creates more demand for housing. Now, I know this isn't specific to just the legalization of marijuana, but it does produce demand, and a common theme in this is demand raises values. So this is almost a positive byproduct of legalizing marijuana and how it affects the housing market. And one of the big things that I kept reading everywhere about legalizing marijuana is people talked about the crime. It's going to bring crime. We're bringing drugs into the community, and more drugs equals more crime, right? Well, let's dive into this a little more. First off, it is well established that crime rates, or even just perceived crime rates, can negatively or positively affect home values in an area. So one would think that legalizing marijuana would put great down pressure on the housing market. But that alone to me is just perceived crime. However, in Denver, one of the studies showed a 19% decrease in the crime rate in neighborhoods with a dispensary. And two other studies found decreases in violent and property crimes in states that have legalized marijuana. So that's 4 total studies that are telling you that crime actually went down after the legalization of marijuana. There are going to be a lot of people that you can't convince otherwise. They're going to have that perceived crime rate as higher, and to them, homes in these neighborhoods just aren't going to be valued as much. However, in actuality, it has been observed that crime rates have actually gone down in these areas, which overall is going to give a home more value because it's going to be more attractive to buyers. And again, more buyers equals more demand equals higher prices. So let's get back to that question that I asked just a few minutes ago of, would you live near a dispensary, or if a dispensary went in, would you sell your home and move? So how does a nearby dispensary affect values? From a lot of things that I have read, it falls under this category of the grocery store effect. A grocery store within a neighborhood or nearby is an amenity for many buyers. Now, it may not have value to all buyers, but it will have a lot of value to target buyers, especially if we're talking about specialized grocery stores like a Whole Foods, or even a Starbucks falls into this grocery store effect. And just remember that it's not going to bring value to all buyers in this way, just like Starbucks and Whole Foods would. Personally, I don't drink coffee, so the convenience of a Starbucks down the street has no effect on me. Personally, I don't smoke marijuana, so having a dispensary down the street has no effect on me. Would I live by one? Yeah, I would, but it is not an amenity or a convenience that I would search for. So when this happens and you've got a home near a dispensary and you're looking to sell it, I would just say make sure that being near the dispensary isn't your only selling point. And lastly, we're going to talk about the taxes that come from the sale of marijuana. So how does this portion affect home values? I think this is going to all come down to how the state uses these taxes. And I feel the main place that these taxes could be used is to better our schools. Use it to help our children. As someone with a kindergartner and another one getting ready to go into kindergarten in a few years. I would absolutely love it if I could see more money poured into our schools to help with our education and pay our teachers more. Remember what I said about Arizona? That marijuana sales were going to be a $1.5 billion industry. Imagine what the state of South Carolina could do with those taxes, not just to better our schools, but to better our roads. And both of those, having better infrastructure and better schools, both of those things would raise home values, not just near a dispensary, but all over the state. So here's a few downsides that I think you need to be aware of if you own a home, whether it's your primary residence or especially if you are an investor or a landlord. Remember this, with the legalization of marijuana, there's going to be a lot more people smoking. So whether it is your primary residence or it is an investment, I would highly suggest limiting the amount of smoking that happens inside, because we all know how homes with cigarette smokers smell. It is so hard to get that smell out. That is going to negatively affect how you can sell that home. And for the landlords, a lot of realtors in this study by the National Association of Realtors said that it was harder to lease after a home had been used as a grow house. The two main reasons being moisture issues and the smell is hard to get out. So those are some things to think about that could negatively affect your value of your home. So now where are we going to see all of this take place? It's going to happen where there's more population. I don't see dispensaries wanting to open up in more rural, small towns. They're going to want to service the most people that they can to maximize their profits. And that's going to be here in Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Greenville, Columbia, and a handful of other cities across the state. These are the areas that are going to see that grocery store effect when dispensaries are put in. Rural towns that would only service a fraction of that just isn't a good business decision. So they would rather have a few people have to travel into these cities to get to the dispensaries than move the dispensaries to where everyone has to travel. So the biggest effect on those rural areas is going to be when it comes to the land zoned for growing and the large warehouses. There's going to be a big influx there with the need for farmers and warehouse workers. So that's going to give a little bit of boom to those industries and those communities out there. Remember, just because marijuana is legalized doesn't mean this is all going to take place right away. There is a huge difference between the day it is legalized and the day that it starts selling. And I don't think anything is going to happen until after the day it starts selling. It's not going to be an immediate influx of people. It's not going to be an immediate spike in home values. And also, if we are the last state to legalize marijuana, I don't think any of this will happen. Right now, there are no states around us that have legalized marijuana. So it brings us the biggest benefit, especially for those tax dollars, that we can pull people in from other states to come in and add to a $1.5 billion industry. Of course, this video is just my 2 cents on what I've learned from all of these studies and how it could look here in the South Carolina housing market. But I think when you take in a combination of increased jobs in migration, the grocery store effect, and added sales taxes if used right, that the demand for housing has a great chance to go up, which increases our values. And I think it will increase the quality of life here in South Carolina overall. Now, if you have any questions about this, you want to discuss it, hit me up at info@livinginchs.com, or I'll put all of my contact information below. And as always, if you're looking to sell or buy a home in the greater Charleston area, hit me up. I would love to be your real estate resource of choice. Have a great day, and I'll see you over on this next video.